Welcome back to Royal Academy Book Club, Chapter 4 of The Art of Learning, which is entitled Loving the Game. So, he starts off the chapter talking a little bit about a particularly difficult time that he had at one particular tournament that he went to. He says, the transition to open tournaments also forced me to take on the issue of endurance. Once in Philadelphia, a ruthless fellow made me play for over 9 hours. I was a 10-year-old, and he sat stalling at the board in front of obvious moves for 45 minutes at a time. It was a terrible, but learned lesson. And on top of everything else, I had to develop the ability to run a mental marathon, right? The thing I think of note there is that, you know, similarly in League, right, experienced teams will often take on super duper like late game scaling compositions into weaker opponents and force them to try to like play perfectly, win early, or get stalled out and lose, you know. Also, tournaments can run best of fives, right, where mental endurance is a huge factor, right? I mean, even just talking about like the you know, the way Worlds is set up, right? I mean, like, how many games are of like absolutely intense competition as a team playing in like the space of like a week or two? You know what I mean? It's like, it's pretty crazy stuff, right? Lots of prep, lots of game time. So this is certainly I think something that is relevant in the League space. Yeah.
Obviously.
So the next thing that he says is, my whole career, my father and I searched out opponents who were a little stronger than me. So even as I dominated the scholastic circuit, losing was a regular part of my experience. I believe this was important for maintaining a healthy perspective on the game. This reminded me quite a bit of what we saw in like Peak, right? About pushing like a little bit outside of your comfort zone, right? But it kind of offers a new insight too, I feel, right? Going up against opponents that you know are a little better than you kind of almost like gives you permission to lose. You know what I mean? Where like if you're in a ranked match, right, and you're never really sure whether they're like supposed to be like better or worse than you as players. And so it's a lot tougher to lose to players that you feel like you know, that ought to be at the same level as you know.
What do you mean they are all worse than me?
Precisely.
I think that's part of the problem too. Is that you know when you think about chess, it's at least over the board tournament chess. It's not like League where you know on the internet you have the anonymity, right? You don't think of those. I was making this point to my friend yesterday who was really struggling with respecting his opponent, and it was like, we don't really see their faces. We don't really think of them as humans. We think of them as their character, right? Because we never say that the guy that plays Draven is so bad. We just say that Draven is so bad, right? And then what happens is we're like, if we continue to think that, oh, this person or this guy is whatever is really bad, and then we lose to him, then it, you know, sets that cognitive dissonance going. So, you know, one thing I suggested was to stop thinking about it in terms of, you know, that guy's bad or whatever, like that, you know, that guy fucked up or something like that. So it's not about this guy's bad, rather he just made a mistake.
Yeah.
And then that way you don't have to deal with the whole, if he's bad and I lost to him, that means I'm worse and I don't want to be worse. So I'm going to be like, I'm going to blame it on lag.
Yeah.
Or whatever, because that's, you know, something people do to protect their ego.
That's so interesting, right? Like people will put down others in defense of their ego, but then in doing that, when they lose to them, their ego is boom anyway, right? So it's like,
yeah,
damned if you do, damned if you don't, I guess, right?
And that's why I've learned that trying to reframe, at least for me, and even for him, has been really helpful in that. Kind of like he says, it's if you don't think that they're worse than you, and then that gives you permission to lose, because it's not like you're bad, it just means that they're better than you.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really smart. There's a really fantastic quote in the like next week as well on respecting your opponent, and that's kind of a theme that I think we'll get into at that point. But sorry for the cough, by the way. I have one this week.
Unacceptable.
So the question that I have is, how might we actually explore bringing this process of like fighting people who you know are better than you to like more players in League, where matchmaking does what it does in solo queue, right? Like, I know that there have been programs like Learning Fives and
Oh god,
things
please
like
don't
that.
talk about that.
I mean, but seriously though,
Yeah,
right? Like,
that program's an absolute disaster.
the concept though, I feel like there's something there. You know what I mean? Like, whether the execution is good or not, right? Like the notion of,
Yeah.
of like having a space where people can play with and against people that they know are, you know, significantly more skilled than them. I think there's a lot of value there, and the fact that that isn't a more widespread thing in League, that people don't really have easy access to it, I feel like can be really harmful to the, especially the mental game development of all sorts of players. I mean, you know, we see all of the, you know, all of the players that exist, I mean, including us, right, who just like absolutely cannot handle losing, right? Like, it's just not, you know, you're never supposed to be able to lose, you know, it's never supposed to be seen as acceptable.
Yeah,
And that
because
ends up,
any
being really tough.
opponent is in the same matchmaking bracket as you, so it means you can beat them.
Yeah.
Which means you can every lose you have, you are 100% responsible for it, and there's nothing that will change that ever, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if you take that mindset, like, dang, that's rough. You know what I mean? Like, because ostensibly the matchmaking system is trying to make you lose roughly half your games. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to try to put you against opponents of equal skill to you, not worse than you, right? But in order to climb, you have to be better than them. And so, like, you know, it gets into this whole mental gymnastics of, like, I'm supposed to be climbing, therefore I have to be better than them. So if I'm not better than them, then I don't deserve to climb, and then I'm not good. Or whatever, you know? It's like, things get tough. Things get tough. So, I've been pushing for this point in a lot of different ways, right? Over the past couple of months. But, like, having separation between the space that you use to learn and the space that you use to compete, I think is really, really important. And I think it's something that not nearly enough League players do, right? Where everyone's playing ranked every single game, and like you have to balance, like, okay, like, I'm in a novel situation that I've not seen before, right? Do I make the more aggressive play and learn something? Or do I make the more passive play and dramatically increase my chances of not inting and going on to win the game? And like, that's a really hard choice to make.
It depends on your skill level of the player too, I feel like. 'Cause, I mean, like, if you're like a master tier, like high diamond player, then there's probably not much use you get out of playing normals anyway.
Well, it's all like a
Depends what you
cultural
wanna
thing,
do.
right? I mean, you know, we've all heard the story of how, like, you know, before Faker like went into ranked, like, he played normal games until the queue times were so long that he literally could not.
Well, yeah,
So, like,
true, and
you know,
and I know that it's possible to improve doing that, but like not many people have the same introspection skill as Faker does.
yeah, that's true. You know, I mean, and I would argue, you know, the introspection skill is you know, separate from either one, right? You know, it's like, if you have introspection, then, you know, you can learn in either queue, but one of them is going to be more painful. And if you don't have introspection, then you're not really going to be able to learn in either queue. So it's just kind of a necessary thing, I feel like. But yeah, definitely, it's an important factor. So he then goes on to say, this brings up an incipient danger in what may appear to be an incremental approach. I have seen many people in diverse fields take some version of the process-first philosophy and transform it into an excuse for never putting themselves on the line or pretending not to care about results. They claim to be egoless and to only care about learning, but really, this is an excuse to avoid confronting themselves. This issue of process versus goal is very delicate, and I want to carefully define how I feel the question should be navigated. So I'm like, when I read this, I was like, oh yeah, like this is something we ourselves have been like definitely struggling with, like no doubt. Yeah, like to know how each of those kind of two prongs of it work, and what each of them do is non-trivial. So he goes on to say, internalize a process-first approach by making everyday feedback respond to effort over results. Praise good concentration, a good day's work, a lesson learned, right? When you win a tournament game, the spotlight should be on the road to that moment and beyond, as opposed to the glory. On the other hand, it is okay to enjoy a win. When we've worked hard and succeed at something, we should be allowed to smell the roses. The key, in my opinion, is to recognize that the beauty of those roses lies in their transience. It is drifting away even as we inhale. We enjoy the win fully while taking a deep breath. Then we exhale, note the lessons learned, and move on to the next adventure. So, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like do both. You know what I mean? It's like it is okay to feel happy when you achieve an achievement-oriented goal, and it's okay to feel sad when you don't achieve an achievement-oriented goal. But you have to recognize that the process-oriented goals are what get you there, right? And so to always be keeping your attention on those as much as you can tends to be important, tends to produce the best results. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on this, kind of like the balance between process and goal?
No.
Such like it's a topic where the limits, like the difference between being focused on the process and not challenge you, and being focused on the process and also like challenging yourself, is so thin that it's really super easy to delude yourself when you're completely like trying to safeguard your ego without even realizing it. So it's definitely something I've had trouble with, with just trying to say I'm focused on improving myself playing solo queue and completely stopping playing with any team and looking for any team for extended period of time, saying no, I'm just focused on the process. Well, in fact, I was just not willing to go and play with the team and to challenge myself to play against even stronger teams.
So, in your experiences with this, have you developed any metrics or any road signs that you pay attention to know when you might have drifted too far in either direction?
It's nothing really like patented or like fully efficient, but I've realized that when I'm just going through the motions and like thinking, okay, this is what I'm doing, and then I'm just playing the game, and after the game, just like win, lose, and then I can think of a few things that I've been working on, and I realized that like the game felt kind of empty. And I could say, yeah, but I'm like focused on my goals, and I can say I was working on this and that and improved here. But in the end, I wasn't, challenging myself. I was just like, yeah, I'm focused on the process, but in the end, end up not being focused on playing and not focused on putting effort.
Yeah. So something along the lines of like
trusting the process to do the work for me, if that makes sense.
So yeah, I think that's a really good barometer actually, is like how you feel after you've finished a session or a game or something like that, right? And if you feel, interested and buzzy and like you got all these ideas and stuff, then that's like, that's probably good. If you're feeling more empty, then probably something is wrong, and it might be that you're focusing too much on the process and not enough on achievement. And because as I've kind of become fond of saying, right, there's like process-oriented goals and achievement-oriented goals, right? And achievement-oriented goals are where all of the motivation comes from. No one's excited to do the process-oriented goals. There's no motivation there. You know what I mean? Like, those are the tools that get you to the achievements, which are what you care about. So if there's a lack of energy, a lack of motivation, then probably it's a matter of not having enough achievement focus, right? And being a little bit too process-oriented. Meanwhile, I would say on the other hand, right, if all you're experiencing is constant ups and downs in your mood based entirely on your results, right, and you maybe aren't using metrics anymore, you feel like you already should be there, that kind of stuff, right, that may then be signs that you've lost sight of the process and you just want to get there. It's like if the phrase "get there one time" is resonant, maybe take a little bit a step back and look at the process again, I think. But certainly that balance is something that is really at the heart, I feel, of what it means to be a good player. And like knowing how to strike it's not easy, right? So it's something that takes time to develop mastery over. So he continues to say, when you lose, the stakes will feel a bit higher. You put your heart on the line and you lost. You shouldn't say that it doesn't matter, because you know better than that, and lying about the situation isolates you in your pain. If it didn't matter, why should you try to win? Why should you study chess or League and waste your weekends at tournaments, right? Empathy is a great place to start. Remind yourself that it's okay to be sad. Disappointment is part of the road to greatness. Identify your mental game mistake and take on that issue as a short-term goal in continuing the process. Introspective thinking of this nature can be a very healthy coping mechanism. So, to me, if I was to try to sum that up, it's essentially like I said before, right? Like, it's okay to be sad when you don't hit the achievement-oriented goals that you set for yourself. That's like normal and natural, and it's okay, right? The only thing that you have to do is make sure that you're okay, and be around people that care about you and that you care about, and have them comfort you, and then make sure that if there was a problem in your process, that you figure out what it was, so that you can learn from that experience and take it with you into the future. So, yeah, it seems like healthy advice to me. Any thoughts on that piece?
Nope.
Okay.
Not really.
So he goes on to say, the fact of the matter is that there will be nothing learned from any challenge in which we don't try our hardest. Growth comes at the point of resistance. We learn by pushing ourselves and finding what really lies at the outer reaches of our abilities. Again, it's just peak, right? Get outside your comfort zone. If you don't do that, probably not going to learn too much. At least in terms of learning stuff from stage 2 to stage 3 of the adult learning model, right? You can, I think you can learn quite a bit. Or not learn quite a bit, but you can do a lot of work to familiarize stuff in areas that are still pretty comfortable. But that's a different piece. He says too, of course, there were plateaus, periods where my results leveled off while I internalized the information necessary for my next growth spurt. but I didn't mind. I had a burning love for chess, and so I pushed through the rocky periods with a can-do attitude. And although this is like quite clearly the goal, I wish there was a little more how-to here. You know what I mean? Because this is something that I think all three of us have struggled quite a bit with, right? You know, when we hit a plateau, like, feeling okay during that can feel like a monumental task in a lot of ways. So I wish that there was more here. And that's literally the chapter. Isn't that sad?
Wait, is that it?
Yeah, it's literally it. It's a pretty short one. Do we want to do maybe a second one? Or should we just call it here? What are you guys feeling?
Wow, that's I'm upset.
Yeah. No, there really wasn't much. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it wasn't much, right? It feels like it's just stuff that we've kind of already talked at great length about. You know what I mean? And so it all seems kind of obvious to us, I think. But I bet that there are a bunch of people that, you know, these kinds of ideas of, like, you know, sort of how to think about competition are really new and unusual, you know? So it's not bad to have gone over it, but yeah, I think you get variations on pretty much this advice in pretty much any kind of, you know, mastery-oriented competitive book that you're going to pick up. Excuse me. So, yeah. So I do have notes for another chapter if we want to go on to it, but if we want to call it here, we can call it here too.
Yeah, let's call it here.
Okay. Well, even though it was short, a pleasure. Did we have any takeaways out of this one?
Not really.
No, not me either.
Let's see. I felt like I had one. Oh yeah. No, it was just like, you know, all it took was asking the question for me to kind of realize the answer. But that idea of, like, figuring out when you're too far towards process or too far towards goal, that you can kind of use your, like, level of energy, level of emotion after a session to kind of gauge that. You know what I mean? It's like there's level of improvement and level of engagement, right? And how well you're doing on your achievement oriented goals and setting goals that feel challenging but within reach. That's going to be, you know, looking at your motivation in a lot of ways. But then, you know, and Mental Game of Poker talks too about how, you know, that energy can get sapped away by other mental game problems. So not having energy doesn't necessarily mean that your goals are bad. It might also mean that you don't see a clear process to get to your goals, but that's kind of a different thing. But you know, generally using level of emotion, level of energy as kind of a barometer for your achievement oriented goals, and then using I don't know, just like learning metrics, you know what I mean, to keep track of your actual technical progress as a barometer for whether your process is working for you and whether you're setting appropriately good goals in your process. So that's my takeaway.
I like it.
Anyhow, I guess I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for showing up.
Yep.
Catch you around.
Later, man.